Originally, when I was planning on doing this video, I was thinking, well, it's really going to be mostly relevant to the following of people with chronic health issues. And then I started to see it more and more within my own friend community. It also applies to people who are sort of into the wellness world. And so what the term I use, and it's not my term, you might have heard it before, is addiction to healing or addiction to wellness, right? And it sounds like such an oxymoron because it's like, why would, wanting to heal or being into wellness be a bad thing? The thing is, when something takes over your life, that's when it starts to become problematic, right? And so the challenge is, and one of the biggest challenges with this topic is it's something good, right? People should be into wellness and people should absolutely want to heal, because then there's the other extreme of people who don't take care of themselves or people who end up with chronic health challenges and don't do much about it. But again, this is where I talk about, and you'll see my new page, we talk about balance in the middle ground, right? You can't be over here, you don't want to be over here. Things need to swing sort of back towards the center. And so what I see often, at least with clients, and I live this myself so I can appreciate that journey, is it's taken over their lives, right? This need to get well, and it's like everything revolves around that. And they'll tell me, and I had this happen too, where other people in their lives are noticing it and starting to make comments about it, right? Like, you don't have any other interest, or this is taking over your life, or this is the only thing you talk about. And I think the defensive reaction, and it's so understandable always, is, well, I want to get better. And I know, like, when it started with just a genuine interest in all of this stuff for me. And I've always been pretty good at research, and I've always enjoyed researching, and that's why I used to want to go into consulting. And then as my health problems were piling up and up and up, and nobody had answers for me, and I'm getting passed around from doctor to doctor to doctor, I started to get more immersed in it. And originally it was great, right? Like, I'm learning more and more and more. I'm able to give tidbits of information to other people, etc. But before I knew it, it had taken over my life. And people around me were calling me out on it and said, like, this disease has taken over your life. Like, this is the only thing you can talk about. You don't talk about anything else, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I would be so defensive because I would say, well, how can I not? Because I can't even function. I don't even have a life right now. I need to get better. And now that I'm on the healthier side of things, I understand completely. And I will tell you, for me, with my situation, I was basically forced to have to give up that stuff. I was sort of forced to focus on some other things. And it was the most liberating thing that ever happened to me. And I didn't realize how much burden and stress I was walking around with trying to heal and fix myself. And you will see that, and this applies to my wellness people too. You will see there is always conflicting research out there. There's always conflicting answers. So somebody can tell you, veganism is the answer and plant-based is the answer. And then somebody's going to come along and tell you, keto is going to heal every disease there is. And, whether it's like, oh, this supplement's a miracle, and then somebody comes out and says, oh, well, you shouldn't take too much of that supplement because it causes an imbalance of something else. And the list goes on and on. It's the same thing, a medication will come out and somebody will say, like, oh, it's really helped me. And then 10 people chime in and say, like, it left me with these debilitating side effects and you shouldn't take it for this reason. It will drive you insane. And, I see that all the time. So now you got somebody who's already a little bit fragile and vulnerable because they're dealing with challenges. And now you're bombarded with just information left and right, and all that ends up doing, and I see that, and that's what happened to me, it leaves you paralyzed. And what I mean, emotionally paralyzed, where you stop even being able to make a decision or trust anything because somebody out there has told you this isn't going to work or that's going to be damaging. And I see that with my clients. It's the biggest hurdle in getting to trust. Like, when you work with me, I say, we're going to choose a path and you're going to stick with it for a while. And it's the hardest thing to let go of that control. And I think sometimes we think if we keep researching, reading, trying this, that, and the other thing, that somehow we're in control. And I always tell people, control is an illusion. You know, that's not reality. We don't have control over these things. I mean, we can take actions, we can help ourselves. You know, they'll talk about control your reactions. I mean, you can make decisions, but you don't have control over situations. And so, you know, that's where it becomes a slippery slope. And then we get into all these dogmatic regimens, and, you know, this is in the wellness world too, of I got to stick with this dogmatic routine, and I got to eat this diet, and I can't eat, you know, 1 gram of sugar and whatever it may be. And it's like the amount of stress that's putting on you. I always say it's going to undo anything you're trying to do. You know, when I see people in these really rigid diets that have them stressed through the roof, I say your stress is going to override any beneficial effects from this healing diet, because stress, it directly affects the GI tract. I talk about all the time, stress affects everything in the body. And one of the things is you're already dealing enough. If you're trying to heal from something, it means you already deal with enough in your life. You don't need to put all this self-imposed pressure and rules and rigidity, because all it's doing is making your life that much more miserable, right? And I can't tell you, you know, part of giving that up for me was I had to leave groups I had been following. There's very few groups out there that I think are beneficial. They tend to just get negative, conflicting research, drag each other down. You know, I had to leave groups. I stopped researching. I don't pay any attention now to like new diet fads. I for my business, I will keep up to it a little bit, but I don't, you know, I used to hear these things and run with it and be like, this is the next miracle cure. And, you know, that's part of that addiction, right? It's like always looking for the next fix. And, you know, it's funny because we're saying, well, obviously, like, I want to be able to function in the world. I want to get better. But when you have this addictive pattern of just, I need the next fix, I need the next fix, I need the next fix, you know, I always talk about you've stopped living in the moment. And that's what I did. Is I always was living for some point in the future. You know, I couldn't accept where I was at the moment. I won't be happy until I can walk again, or I won't be happy until I can be functional again, or I won't be happy until I have my health back. And that was the number one critical error I made. And, you know, everything changed for me. And I think I've talked about that in another video, was when I made peace with the situation. And I was still in a wheelchair, and I was pretty non-functional, but I was able to sit up in a wheelchair, and I'll never forget that moment for the rest of my life. And I finally clicked for me, I can still be happy. And I felt genuinely happy in that moment. And I realized, you know, that all this incessant need and pressure and all that stuff I had finally let go of. And I will tell you that was the turning point for me. And it's not, I still pursued things after that. I still pursued treatments. I still worked really hard with neuroplasticity programs. I still did all that. But I let go of this incessant need to be fixed and healed. And then, you know, next best miracle cure. And that's for all of you in the wellness world too. You know, enjoy what you're doing, but don't get caught up in the next, like, this is gonna, you know, I need to take this supplement to live 10 more years, and this is gonna fix my brain, and, you know, this will fix my joint pain in my right pinky. You know, it's great to have a wellness regime. It's great to be passionate about wellness. It's great to be interested in health. But, you know, you still need to live, and you still need to have an identity outside of that. And, you know, that's why people will push back, because honestly, people can notice it on the outside. Why do they want to be around somebody who can only be caught up in their own addiction? It's like, you know, for any of you who have dealt with addicts in your life, it's sort of these, what would I say? You know, it's these little delusions that we're living by, that like, oh, you know, I don't have a problem, there's no issue here, right? And that's the biggest thing, you know, people will tell you when they're dealing with somebody, a friend or a family member with addiction, right? That's the most frustrating piece. And it still exists here, even if it's something where you're trying to help yourself. You know, you can still work to get better and still have a life. And, you know, it was so liberating to spend my little energy I had at that point and do something enjoyable, you know, whether it was watching some stupid TV show. And I know some of you can't even tolerate stimulation right now, so that's not the best example, but it was at a point that I could do that. Or, you know, I'd watch some birds. A lot of times I would just look out the window and watch the birds. You know, when I had more strength, I would paint, you know, whatever it may be. And you know, you have to you'll get to a point where, and that's for my wellness gurus too. It's like, hey, you know, do things. If you like yoga, do yoga because you enjoy it, but don't be looking for every next thing as this is going to fix me or make me that much better. It's about what makes you joyful. And that's really the key to healing, and why I talk about that is we take the stress out of the picture. And I always talk about, you cannot heal in a chronic stress response. You cannot heal in a chronic stress response. You cannot heal in a chronic stress response. When you are running from next thing to next thing to next thing to next thing, that's a lot of stress, because there's a lot of pressure, whether you realize it on the conscious level or not, that this has got to work, this has got to work, this has got to work, I need this, I need this, I need this, right? So it doesn't mean you're never going to try something again. By no means is that what it means, but you'll start to get to a point where you're very, very selective, and you start one thing and you give it time. And you know, for me, that's what I stress with you guys. I still keep neuroplasticity and stress programs at the core of everything, but it doesn't mean I don't treat some of the outside branches. But again, one thing at a time, giving it a couple months, you know, and never like this is the next cure-all or this need for it to fix me. You know, if it works, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. You know, and there's so much liberation in that, and so much peace in that. You know, even if you say it out loud, you might feel your whole body soften. And that's really the last piece. It's one of the biggest things I have to convince people. Can you let go of the research just temporarily? Can you get off the internet? And that doesn't mean you want to be on Facebook having great chats and following people's, you know, social lives, memes, reading interesting articles outside of this, reading about, you can read about psychology if it interests you. You can read about politics if it's not too stressful, you know, even just happy stories, follow positive videos. That is sort of the key we're looking for. And over time, you'll be able to, obviously this is my profession. And the thing is, I can read this research without getting caught up in it now. And that takes time to be able to get there. You know, and normally it takes walking away for a while to do that. And I'm still very selective with what I surround myself with. I read research. I don't go get thousands of opinions. And so the groups I stay in are more positive focused and talk about other things rather than just this symptom, that symptom, this is going to heal this and this is going to heal that. And you know, that's part of the healing path, is realizing it's having the discernment to be able to say, hey, this isn't good for me. There are still things I can't read for myself because of my journey, you know, especially when it's about hospital experiences. That was very traumatic for me. So if I notice that, if I start to notice a couple of paragraphs in, it's making me uneasy, my body's doing this, I say this isn't for me, and I close it, you know. And that's one of the biggest goals you're going to need to work on, is to really discern, hey, if this is triggering stuff for me, I need to walk away. And so that's the same thing, even if you're dealing with wellness. If it's starting to become overwhelming, like, oh my gosh, you know, what about this supplement? And they said this supplement will help, but it could interact with this. I mean, I'm giving you different examples, that discernment to say, wow, this isn't helping me and I need to walk away. Or even if you're getting overwhelmed, I see that all the time. If you're getting overwhelmed with nutritional information, you need to walk away. And that's the key. And that's why sometimes I say, you know, when I'm working with somebody, I'm there by your side to be able to help you be the one to make that decision of like, okay, maybe it's time to add something in here or look at another avenue. But it's, again, trusting those people outside of you, because you're too caught up in it in the moment. And that's one of the key things. So I hope that is a helpful concept, and I'd be glad to elaborate. If you guys give me feedback and you want more on that, I'd be glad to elaborate. But I think we talked about some steps to take. This is definitely a longer one because there's a lot to talk about here, but I hope you enjoy your weekend and you stay warm, and happy MLK Day, and we will see you next week.